Okay, guys, we left off here on Tuesday looking at motives, humanitarian motives for social Darwinism. Remember, we looked at economic motives, political motives, all that stuff, looking at trying to make your colony better and securing natural resources and then competing with other countries as well for the use of those resources. Now, with social Darwinism, we also looked at these two things real quick, just the Darwin Awards and kind of poking fun at some of those stories, but illustrating the point that they felt the colonial country powers now felt that they had to save these people. Okay, another motive is this idea of the white man's burden, which now is used, I think, more as a criticism of empire, but at that time it was used as a very much a justification. And basically, what they argue is that there's a moral obligation of countries like Britain and other Western nations to civilize those that aren't civilized. So they're not civilized because they're barbaric or they're savage or anything like different things like that. And in the article you read now, in the moral audit article, it talked about credits and debits of empire, and really it's looking at this justification along with social Darwinism, but really the white man's burden as to how that all fits out. Okay, now the author of that article argues really these 5 points: that the credits of the British Empire was that they focused on liberty and freedom. So the fact that they would bring freedom to these people and free them either from their condition or from their state of oppression that they're currently in was a big motivating factor. He also argues that the British Empire civilized the different cultures that they overtook, and I don't think that's a point to be debated. But the question that now becomes, whose definition of civilized are you using? And obviously, it was a Western or a British idea. Another credit is that they improved societies and had diverse or huge economic impacts. So the example we used in class with a lot of groups was pretty simple. Would India in the early 1900s have roads, railroads, telegraph lines, all that stuff if it weren't for the British? Would they be as connected? Would their population be able to grow? Would they be able to defend themselves? And I think the answer is probably not. Now, again, all that is judged based on how, or is judged through the lens of the British, or judged through the lens of the West. Finally, the last credit that this author gives the British Empire is one of kind of benevolence, where you know what, they got rid of the empire when they had to, and that just shows that it was a positive thing, and they knew when to let go and when to grant that freedom, and because that's what they thought this was all about in the long run, was the freedom. Okay. Now, as we move to the debit side, I want you to think about a couple things. One, how many of these credits and how many of the debits are actually tangible things? How many of them can you put your hands on? For instance, can you physically grab freedom? Probably not. Can you physically walk on a road? Yeah, and you see tangible results. So how many of them are tangible? How many of them are not? How many of them are ideas? And how many of them are somewhat subjective, meaning, it's open for interpretation. All right, so moving on and looking at the debits. Um, he argues that the British Empire claimed they were doing good things, but basically they were just stealing resources from the people. He argues that the British Empire was very coercive, meaning they forced the different people and governments to do what the British wanted, and that they were exploitative, that they took advantage of those people. He said that the British Empire caused multiple wars, that they caused and did not respond to famine and actually used famine as a weapon. He said the debit of the empire was the fact that it was done because it inherently was a racist idea. They were looking to improve, quote unquote, lesser breeds. So those who were not as developed as the British or the Westerns. Um, he also said that a huge debit, even though their main goal was freedom, was that when people fought for their freedom, when the oppressed fought for their freedom, or when the colonized fought for their freedom, The British didn't let them just go free. I mean, they retaliated militarily and they came down harshly on those that tried to rebel. Um, I think a story that everyone knows is the United States um, fight for independence. I mean, the British didn't just say, okay, go have fun. I mean, they fought a long, protracted war and put economic sanctions on the colonies and things like that. Another debit was that it encouraged the slave trade. Um, so without the British Empire, slavery wouldn't have been as um, impactful and widespread as it was. And he argues that basically the empire boils down to a pillaging of the world, where they took whatever they wanted. Now, the British Empire took whatever they wanted without regard to anything else. So, again, how many of these things are tangible? How many of them are, real? How many of them are subjective? Okay. Um, so Britain is the really overall leader. Now, our next unit, we're going to look at revolutions and study the Industrial Revolution, all that stuff. What really starts in England, and they have a vast need for natural resources, which leads them to be imperialistic. Okay, um, now you're looking at the mid 1800s. Britain is incredibly powerful and wide-reaching. You can see in this map all of the British holdings. Okay, they have holdings in North America, South America. I mean, every continent: Africa, Asia, and Southeast Asia, including Australia. Okay, so you have to look at it this way: they're the producers of the world. So, in order to keep their factories running, they need to draw natural resources from all over the world. And the model is kind of outdated, but a lot of times they'd ship those resources to England, manufacture them, and then resell them to other places. Okay. The other thing you have to look at this as you look at this kind of condensed map is the United Kingdom now, or Britain, needs to be able to respond to um, either rebellions or threats to their power across the globe. So they need to be able to have an army or a navy, excuse me, that can be deployed and attack or defend wherever they're needed. The other thing, and I know it's difficult to read down here, I apologize for that. Um, England and London becomes the financial center of the world. They're the banks that are financing um, different groups. They're the banks that are financing colonies. They're the banks that are financing entrepreneurs who are bringing things to the colonies, who are transporting goods, all that stuff. So not only are they an empire in terms of just possessions, they start to become a financial empire in this time as well. All right, guys, we'll stop there and pick up with a couple different maps and looking at other colonial powers throughout the world. Remember now, Britain's a big dog, and they don't like to be threatened. Thanks. Thanks.